The fat bride broke her husband's fingers on their wedding night, then climbed into the wrong black SUV with blood on her hands, and found the most feared mafia boss in New York, staring back at her like she had interrupted a funeral. Callista Hawthorne had expected her first night as Mrs. Thatcher Kensington to smell like roses, champagne, and expensive perfume. She had expected soft city lights through the windows of the Manhattan penthouse, quiet music from the reception still floating somewhere in her head, and maybe one polite little argument about how soon they could leave for their honeymoon. She had not expected screaming. She had not expected blood. She had not expected her new husband to raise his hand against her before the wedding cake had even been cleared from the ballroom. Only 3 hours earlier, everyone had called her lucky. The guests had watched her walk down the aisle in a gown that hugged every curve she had once been taught to hide, and they had smiled the careful smiles rich people wore when they were deciding whether a woman was impressive or embarrassing. Callista had felt those eyes on her shoulders, her waist, her hips, her round face beneath the veil, and she had lifted her chin anyway. Her gown was ivory satin, fitted and bold, with pearl buttons down the back and sleeves that shimmered softly whenever she moved. Her lipstick was deep red. Her earrings were diamonds borrowed from her grandmother. Her smile had been sharp enough to make the whispering aunties look away first. She was fat. She was fashionable. She was a Hawthorne. She had learned a long time ago that if the world wanted to stare, she might as well give it something worth staring at. Thatcher Kensington had looked perfect beside her. Of course he had. Kensington men were raised to look perfect in public. Tall, pale, polished, with blonde hair brushed back from a face that seemed made for portraits and charity boards. His family had old money, or at least they knew how to act like it. Their townhouse had oil paintings, their country club had rules older than most states, and their relatives spoke in soft voices as if loud emotion was something only poor people suffered from. For months, Thatcher had treated Callista like a rare business merger wrapped in romance. He sent white roses. He praised her father's company. He kissed her hand in restaurants. He told her she was different from the thin, cold women he had grown up around. Warmer, he said. Realer. A woman with substance. Callista had laughed at that because it sounded like a compliment that had lost its courage halfway through, but she had wanted to believe the better meaning. She had wanted to believe she was entering a family where elegance meant kindness, not just good lighting. The reception had been held beneath crystal chandeliers in a private club overlooking Central Park. The Kensingtons floated through the room like swans trained by lawyers. Sterling Kensington, Thatcher's father, gave a speech about tradition, loyalty, and the honor of joining two respected families. Lenora, Thatcher's mother, sat beside him in pale blue silk, smiling whenever people looked her way, and lowering her eyes whenever Sterling touched her arm. Callista noticed that. She noticed many things. She noticed Aunt Coraline corrected the waiters without moving her lips very much. She noticed Thatcher drank too fast after her father, Garrison Hawthorne, joked about looking forward to seeing the Kensington work ethic up close. She noticed Sterling's smile tightened whenever anyone mentioned business. But weddings were strange things. Every family had nerves. Every rich family had secrets. Callista told herself not to build a mystery out of manners. By midnight, the party had softened into its final expensive blur. Guests kissed cheeks. Cars arrived under the awning. Photographers packed away their lights. Thatcher's hand stayed at Callista's lower back. Not painful, but firm in a way that began to bother her once she realized it never really relaxed. The penthouse was waiting above the city, a wedding gift from Sterling and Lenora, though Thatcher had explained that the deed was complicated and old family properties were never simple. Callista had been too tired to question it. Her feet hurt. Her cheeks ached from smiling. Her hairpins felt like tiny weapons against her scalp. All she wanted was to take off the gown, wash the makeup from her face, and breathe in a room where no one was judging how much space she took up. The Kensington penthouse sat near the top of a glass tower on Fifth Avenue, high enough that the city below looked quiet and obedient. Inside, everything was cream stone, gold fixtures, tall windows, and furniture that looked too expensive to sit on, honestly. The rest of the Kensington family had come up after the reception for one last private toast. Callista had not loved that, but Thatcher said it was tradition. One drink, one blessing, then everyone would go. Aunt Coraline kissed Callista's cheek with lips cold as a spoon. Sterling called her daughter with a warmth that somehow never reached his eyes. Lenora squeezed Callista's hand for 1 second too long, then let go, as if she had remembered someone was watching. Callista went into the bedroom to change. Her maid of honor had already gone home. Her mother had cried herself tired. Her father was downstairs arguing with the driver about whether anyone had packed the leftover cake. So Callista stood alone in front of the mirror and slowly unbuttoned the gown herself. It took patience. It took twisting her arm at an angle that made her mutter several words her grandmother would not have approved of. When the dress finally loosened, she stepped out of it, like she was stepping out of a very beautiful trap. Underneath, she wore a silk slip and bare feet. Her hair fell heavy around her shoulders as she pulled out pins one by one. For the first time all day, she looked like herself again. Tired, flushed, still glowing a little despite everything. Then came the first shout. It was low enough that she almost ignored it. A man's voice from the living room, hard, angry. Then came a crash, sharp and ugly against all that marble. Callista froze with a hairpin between her fingers. Another voice followed, a woman's voice. Not loud, not dramatic, just frightened in a way that made Callista's stomach turn cold. She grabbed the nearest robe, tied it over the slip, and opened the bedroom door. The hallway outside was dim. The penthouse smelled like champagne and white lilies. Somewhere in the living room, Sterling Kensington said something she could not quite hear, and then there was the sound of skin hitting skin. Callista moved before thought could slow her down. The living room was full of people, and no one was moving. That was the part she would remember later. Not the broken glass on the floor, not Lenora bent near the edge of the sofa with one hand pressed to her mouth. Not Sterling standing over her, face red, silver hair disordered, cufflinks flashing beneath the warm lights. What Callista would remember was the silence of everyone else. Aunt Coraline sat in a velvet chair with a glass of brandy in her hand. Thatcher stood near the bar, jaw tight but body still. Two cousins looked down at their phones. One elderly uncle stared out the window as if Manhattan had suddenly become fascinating. Lenora's lip was bleeding. Callista crossed the room. "What are you doing?" Every head turned toward her. For one strange second, no one answered, as if she had spoken in a language the Kensingtons had never been forced to learn. Sterling straightened his jacket. "This is not your concern." Callista looked at Lenora. The older woman's eyes were wet, but not surprised. "That hurt worse than the blood. Lenora, come here." Lenora shook her head almost invisibly. Thatcher stepped forward. "Callista." His voice was soft, warning soft. She ignored him and reached for Lenora's arm. "Can you stand?" "Callista," Thatcher said again, sharper now. "Leave it alone." She turned on him. "Your father hit your mother." His face changed, but not in the way she expected. There was no shock in it, no horror, only irritation, as if she had spilled wine on a rug. "My mother is fine," he said. Lenora gave a tiny sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so sad. Callista stared at him. "She is bleeding." Aunt Coraline set her glass down with a gentle click. New brides are emotional. "It is a very long day." Callista looked at her. "Did you just call a woman getting hit an emotional misunderstanding?" Coraline's eyes cooled. "You would be wise to lower your voice." "I would be wise to do a lot of things," Callista said. "Tonight has not inspired me." Sterling took one step toward her. "You are in my home." "Noted." Callista said. Horrible place. Something moved across Thatcher's face then. Embarrassment. Not because his mother had been hurt, because Callista had made the room feel ugly out loud. He grabbed her wrist. It was not the hardest grip she had ever felt, but it was the first time he had touched her like she belonged to him. That alone was enough. Callista looked down at his hand, then slowly back up at his face. Let go. Thatcher smiled thinly. You do not understand this family yet. No, she said. I'm starting to. Stay out of it. This is family business. The words landed in the room like a locked door. Callista stepped closer, still holding his gaze. I became family 3 hours ago, darling. Terrible timing for you. His smile vanished. The slap came fast, faster than dignity, faster than thought. His palm cracked across her cheek, turning her face to the side. The room went still, not shocked still, waiting still. As if everyone wanted to see whether the new bride would cry, apologize, shrink, and become manageable. Callista's cheek burned. She touched it once. Her red lipstick had smeared faintly against the side of her hand. Then she laughed. It was not loud. It was not cheerful. It was the kind of laugh that made Thatcher's eyes flicker, because he suddenly understood he had reached into a box without checking what lived inside it. Oh, she said softly. You thought that would work. Thatcher tried to pull his hand back. Callista caught it. She had grown up with 3 cousins, 2 horses, a father who believed daughters should know how to throw a punch, and a grandmother who once broke a man's nose with a silver serving tray during a charity auction in 1978, and never apologized. Callista twisted Thatcher's wrist, stepped in close, and bent 2 of his fingers back until something gave with a small, sickening snap. Thatcher screamed. Aunt Coraline rose from her chair. Someone cursed. Sterling lunged forward and stopped only when Callista lifted Thatcher's broken hand higher and made him gasp. Listen carefully, she said, her voice calm now, almost sweet. I am not one of your little porcelain women. I am not here to be slapped into manners. I am not here to become quiet because your family confuses cruelty with tradition. And if anyone in this room touches me or Lenora again, I will start breaking things that do not heal straight. Thatcher was breathing through his teeth. You crazy. She bent his fingers another inch. He went silent. Callista turned to Lenora. We're leaving. Lenora looked at Sterling first. That old fear rose in her face like a ghost that knew the house better than she did. Sterling spoke through clenched teeth. Lenora will stay where she belongs. Callista smiled at him. That sentence just aged you badly. She moved to Lenora's side, wrapped an arm around her, and helped her stand. Lenora was trembling. Her silk dress had torn near the shoulder. There was a bruise darkening at her jaw, one that had not come from tonight. Callista saw it, and a colder understanding opened inside her. This had not started at the wedding. This was older than Thatcher, older than her engagement, maybe older than most of the people pretending not to see it. Thatcher bent over his injured hand, pale with rage. You walk out that door and you are finished. Callista looked back once. Her cheek was still red. Her robe was crooked. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She had never looked less like the polished bride they had ordered. She had never felt more like herself. No, she said. I think I'm just getting started. She took Lenora through the private elevator, while the Kensingtons shouted behind them. Their voices followed like smoke, until the doors slid shut. For a few seconds, neither woman spoke. Lenora held a napkin to her bleeding lip. Callista pressed the button for the underground garage and tried not to notice that her own hand was shaking. I am sorry, Lenora whispered. Callista turned toward her. Do not apologize to me. You should not have seen that. No one should have seen that because it should not have happened. Lenora closed her eyes. You don't know what Sterling is. Then tonight seems like a great time to learn. The elevator descended in a smooth, silent fall. Outside the glass, the city flickered in gold and white, careless and alive. Callista's wedding ring felt suddenly heavy on her finger. She twisted it once, then stopped. Not yet. First, she had to get Lenora safe. Then she could think about the fact that her marriage had lasted less time than most dinner reservations. The garage doors opened to cold concrete, low lights, and rows of black vehicles. Callista had no coat. Lenora had no shoes. Somewhere above them, the Kensingtons were probably calling security, lawyers, doctors, or worse. Callista pulled Lenora forward, scanning for the car Thatcher had said would be waiting. Black SUV, tinted windows, Kensington driver. There were several. Which one? Lenora whispered. I married into a family that thinks personality is a disease, Callista muttered. Of course all their cars look the same. Footsteps sounded behind them. Callista did not wait. She hurried to the nearest black SUV, yanked the rear door open, and helped Lenora inside. Then she climbed in after her, slammed the door, and said, "Drive." No one drove. The car was too quiet. Callista looked up. A man sat across from her in the shadowed back seat, one ankle resting over the other, one hand wrapped around a phone, his dark eyes fixed on her with the calm attention of someone deciding whether she was a problem or a gift. He wore a black suit without a tie. His hair was dark, touched with silver near the temples. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp lines and controlled patience. Two men sat in the front seats. Neither moved, neither asked who she was. That somehow made it worse. The man across from her looked at Lenora's blood, then Callista's flushed cheek, then the red mark on her hand. "You are not my meeting," he said. His voice was low, smooth, dangerous, without needing to prove it. Callista stared at him for half a second, then looked out the window at the garage. Behind them, the elevator doors opened. Sterling's voice carried across the concrete. She turned back to the stranger. "Do you plan to help a bleeding woman, or are you going to sit there looking terrifying for recreational purposes?" The driver's eyes widened. The man across from her did not smile, not exactly, but something changed at the corner of his mouth, small and unwilling. "Who are you?" "Currently," Callista said, "a bride having a very bad evening." "And why are you in my car?" "Because all rich men buy the same funeral-looking vehicles." This time, one of the men in front coughed, as if laughter had attacked him from behind. The stranger's gaze stayed on her. "Do you know whose car this is?" "No, and unless your name is emergency room, I do not care." Lenora swayed beside her. Callista caught her immediately, all the fire in her face softening for one moment. "Stay with me. Keep your eyes open." The stranger saw that. He saw more than most men did. His attention moved from Callista's fury to the careful way she held Lenora upright, the way her body had placed itself between the older woman and the door without thinking. His voice changed when he spoke again. "Marco," he said to the driver. "Private clinic, now." The SUV began moving. Callista let out a breath she had not meant to hold. "Thank you. I did not do it for you." "That's fine. I didn't thank you for your personality." The man looked at her for a long second. Then he smiled. It was small, dark, almost dangerous in itself. "Your husband must be exhausted. My husband has broken fingers and poor judgment." The smile deepened by a fraction. "Recent injury?" "Very." "Yours. Wedding gift." The man leaned back as the SUV rolled toward the exit. "That explains the blood. Some of it." The garage lights slid over his face, revealing the kind of calm that did not come from peace. It came from practice. Callista had been around powerful men her whole life. Men who owned buildings, men who bought companies, men who gave speeches about values while cutting payroll in private. This man was different. He did not fill the car by trying to impress anyone. He filled it because the space around him seemed to understand it should behave. Lenora opened her eyes weakly. When she saw him clearly, her breath caught. Dante Moretti. Callista went still. Even she knew that name. Dante Moretti was not old money. He was older than reputation in a different way. His name lived under polite conversations like a blade under a tablecloth. Construction deals whispered about him. Union bosses feared him. Politicians denied knowing him too quickly. Men with private security still looked over their shoulders when Moretti business crossed their path. Some called him a criminal. Some called him a necessary evil. Everyone agreed on one thing. If Dante Moretti came for what he was owed, no lawyer in Manhattan could save you. Callista slowly looked back at him. Dante watched her realize it. "Ah," he said, "now you care whose car this is." Callista swallowed, then lifted her chin. "Only because if I had known, I would have chosen a better entrance." The driver made that coughing sound again. Dante's eyes warmed with something like amusement. "You climbed into my car barefoot, in a robe, with blood on your hands, and gave orders. To be fair, it has been a stressful night, and yet you remain rude. I prefer focused." He looked at her cheek. The red mark had begun to darken. "Who hit you?" Callista felt the question move through the car like a match struck in a dark room. "No one you need to punish." Dante's gaze sharpened. She regretted the sentence immediately because it sounded too much like an invitation to a man who probably kept revenge on a calendar. She looked away first, out at the city lights blurring past the window. "My husband," she said, "and before you get theatrical, I handled it." "I heard." Lenora made a tiny sound that might have been pain or surprise. Callista adjusted the napkin at her lip. Dante looked at Lenora now, and all amusement disappeared. Sterling Kensington. Lenora flinched at the name. Callista noticed. Dante noticed that she noticed. "How do you know Sterling?" Callista asked. Dante's eyes returned to her. "He owes money in rooms where manners do not matter." "That is unfortunately the most comforting thing I have heard all evening." "Comforting?" "Yes. I was worried he was only evil at home. I prefer my villains with paperwork." Dante was silent for one beat. Then he laughed once, very softly, like the sound had escaped without permission. The clinic was hidden behind a quiet brick building on the Upper East Side, the kind with no sign large enough to invite questions. Dante's men moved first. Doors opened. A doctor appeared before Callista had even helped Lenora out of the SUV. No one asked for insurance. No one asked why a wedding guest was bleeding. No one asked why Dante Moretti arrived with a bride who looked ready to bite through steel. Inside, the lights were warm and low. Lenora was taken into an exam room, with Callista walking beside her, until the doctor gently said she needed space to work. Callista hesitated, then looked at Lenora. "I'll be right outside." Lenora caught her hand. Her fingers were cold. "He will come." Callista squeezed back. "Let him." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. He always comes." Before Callista could answer, Dante spoke from the doorway. "Not tonight." Lenora looked at him as if she wanted to believe him and was afraid belief itself might be punished. Dante did not soften his face, but his voice lowered. "No Kensington enters this clinic unless I allow it." Callista watched him then. The most feared man in New York stood in a private clinic doorway, promising safety to a woman he did not know, and he said it like a simple fact, not a favor. That was the first moment her anger made room for curiosity. The doctor closed the door. Callista stood in the hallway in her robe, bare feet cold against polished floor, cheek burning, hair falling wild around her shoulders. The adrenaline that had carried her out of the penthouse began to thin. In its place came trembling. She hated it. She folded her arms quickly so no one would see. Dante saw anyway. "There is a room where you can sit," he said. "I am not fragile." "I did not say fragile. I said sit." "You always turn concern into commands. Do you always turn help into an argument?" "Usually only when kidnapped by strangers." His eyebrows lifted. "You entered my car, under emotional pressure, and ordered my driver to flee the scene. Efficiently." He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head once, almost to himself. "You are a very strange woman, Callista Hawthorne." She stilled. "I did not give you my name." "No," Dante said, "but you married a Kensington tonight. Half the city saw your photograph before dessert." "Wonderful. So my humiliation has press coverage. Your husband screaming in a garage with broken fingers may distract from it." That surprised a laugh out of her. A real one. Tired, sharp, and gone too fast. Dante's expression shifted again, barely, as if he had liked the sound and disliked that he liked it. Callista sat, because her legs decided pride had become optional. Dante remained standing across from her. One of his men brought a pair of soft clinic slippers and a dark coat. Callista accepted the slippers. She eyed the coat. "Is this a mafia coat?" "It is wool." "That does not answer the question." "It is clean." Suspiciously clean. Dante placed it over the chair beside her, instead of forcing it into her hands. "Wear it or don't." She looked at him. That choice mattered more than it should have. After a moment, she pulled the coat around herself. It smelled faintly like smoke, cedar, and winter air. Her phone began ringing. Thatcher. She stared at the screen until it stopped. Then Sterling called. Then Aunt Coraline. Then an unknown number. Then Thatcher again. Dante glanced at the phone. Persistent. Rich cowards usually are. "Do you want them found?" Callista looked up slowly. "I know where they are." "That is not what I asked." No. There it was. The danger under his calm. A doorway opening into a colder room. Callista held his gaze and saw that he was not joking. If she said yes, something would happen. Something clean. Something quiet. Something the Kensingtons could not charm their way out of. For a second, the thought tempted her. Then Lenora's faint cry came from behind the exam room door. Callista closed her eyes. "I want them exposed. I want every pretty wall around that family torn down in daylight. I want Lenora safe. I want my father protected. And I want Thatcher to learn that I was never the soft thing he thought he bought." Dante studied her. "Not revenge, then?" Callista looked back at him. "Oh, it is absolutely revenge. I just want it well documented." This time Dante smiled fully. It transformed his face in a way that should have made him less frightening. It did not. It only made the danger look interested. "Then we may have a common problem," he said. Callista's phone rang again. This time the name on the screen was Dad. Her throat tightened before she answered. "Hi." Garrison Hawthorne's voice came through loud and alarmed. "Callista Rose Hawthorne, why is Thatcher Kensington calling me to say you attacked him and disappeared with his mother?" Callista leaned back in the clinic chair and looked at the ceiling. "Because," she said, "Thatcher is committed to being inaccurate." There was a pause. Then her father's voice dropped. "Where are you?" "Safe." "That is not a location." "No, but it's the important part." "Callista." She closed her eyes. For the first time all night, she felt young, not weak, just tired enough to want her father to fix the world for 5 minutes, even though she knew he could not. "Sterling hit Lenora," she said softly. "Thatcher hit me when I tried to help her." Silence. The kind of silence that came before storms. Then Garrison said, very carefully, "Where is Thatcher now?" "Probably icing his fingers." "What did you do?" "What you paid for in those self-defense classes." Another pause. Then, despite everything, her father exhaled a hard little sound, that was almost pride and almost rage. "Send me your location." "I will. But Dad, there's more. I need Eric. Quietly. Financial quiet or legal quiet." Callista looked at Dante, who was watching her with unreadable eyes. Both. Garrison did not ask why. That was one of the reasons Callista loved him. When the house was burning, he did not demand a speech about smoke. "I'll wake him," he said. And Callista, "Yes, you did right." Her eyes burned so suddenly she had to look away from Dante. "I know," she said, even though hearing it helped more than she wanted to admit. When she ended the call, the clinic seemed softer around the edges. Dante was still across from her, still dark, still dangerous. But now he looked less like a stranger and more like a question she had not expected the night to ask. "Eric?" he said. "My cousin, forensic financial analyst, annoying genius, terrible at birthdays, excellent with hidden accounts. Useful. Very. And mine, before you get ideas. I have people. I am sure you do. They probably wear black and frighten elevators. They are efficient. So are staplers. I still prefer people with personalities." Dante gave her a long look. "You speak this way to everyone?" "Only men who look like they are waiting for thunder to ask permission." The hallway went quiet. Something in Dante's face changed. Not enough for anyone else to name, but Callista saw it. She had spent a lifetime being underestimated, which meant she had become very good at noticing tiny shifts in people who thought they were impossible to read. Before he could answer, the clinic door opened and the doctor stepped out. Callista stood immediately. "Is she okay?" "She will be," the doctor said. "She has a split lip, bruising along the ribs, and an older injury near her shoulder that needs rest. Nothing appears broken tonight, but this has been going on for a long time." Tonight. The word sat heavily between them. Callista nodded once. "Can I see her?" "She is asking for you." Callista started toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Dante. He was already speaking to one of his men in a low voice. 2 guards outside this hallway. No Kensingtons. No police unless Mrs. Hawthorne asks. No calls into the room unless cleared. Callista folded her arms. "Mrs. Hawthorne." His gaze slid to her wedding ring. "You do not look like Mrs. Kensington." Something inside her went strangely still. Then she removed the ring. It took effort. Her finger was swollen from the long day, and the diamond caught once against her knuckle before it came free. She looked at it in her palm, a huge cold stone, a promise that had turned into evidence. She handed it to Dante. He did not take it at first. "I am not your safe." "No," she said. "You're the man whose car I accidentally stole. That makes you involved." His mouth twitched. "That is not how law works." "It is how my night works." After a moment, Dante held out his hand. She dropped the ring into his palm. It looked smaller there. "If Thatcher asks for it," she said, "tell him he can have it back when he learns to sign divorce papers with his left hand." Dante looked at the ring, then at her. This time, when he laughed, even his men heard it. Callista turned toward Lenora's room, but Dante's voice stopped her at the door. "Callista." It was the first time he said her name without amusement. She looked back. "The Kensingtons will not let tonight end quietly. I know. They will threaten you. I assumed. They will lie. They already started. They may try to make you look unstable, greedy, violent, or ungrateful." Callista touched her sore cheek, then smiled without softness. "Let them." Dante's eyes held hers. Most men, she thought, would have told her not to worry. Most men would have promised to handle it. Most men would have mistaken her exhaustion for surrender. Dante Moretti did none of those things. He simply nodded, as if he recognized the shape of the fight in her, and found it acceptable. "Then we begin in the morning," he said. Callista opened the door to Lenora's room. "No, Mr. Moretti." She stepped inside, where Lenora was waiting beneath a white blanket, with frightened eyes and a bruised mouth. Callista looked back once, her hair loose, his coat around her shoulders, her wedding ring gone from her hand. "We began when he slapped me." And behind her, in the quiet clinic hallway, Dante Moretti smiled, like the night had finally become interesting. By sunrise, every Kensington in Manhattan was looking for the bride who had vanished from her own wedding night, and Callista Hawthorne was sitting in a private clinic wearing a Mafia Boss's coat, while helping her new mother-in-law sip water through a straw. The city outside the window had turned pale and silver, but the night had not ended. It had only changed clothes. Somewhere above the quiet streets, Thatcher was probably holding his broken hand against his chest and telling anyone foolish enough to listen that his wife had gone mad. Sterling was probably calling lawyers who owed him favors. Aunt Coraline was probably deciding which version of the truth would sound most tasteful over breakfast. And Lenora Kensington, who had spent decades apologizing for the violence done to her, kept whispering thank you, as if kindness were something she had borrowed and needed to return. Callista sat beside the clinic bed and pretended she was not exhausted enough to fall through the floor. Her cheek had swollen slightly, where Thatcher had slapped her, and the skin felt hot when she touched it. Her feet were tucked into the soft slippers Dante's men had found. His dark coat hung heavy around her shoulders, too large and too warm, making her look less like a runaway bride and more like a woman who had stolen winter from a dangerous man. Lenora noticed it, because women who lived inside violent houses noticed everything. Her eyes moved from the coat to Callista's face and back again. "He gave you that?" Callista glanced down, temporarily. "I think, with men like him, wool may come with a contract." Lenora's mouth trembled like she wanted to smile, but had forgotten how to let one stay. Dante Moretti does not lend things. "Wonderful. Then I have committed another crime." Lenora reached carefully for Callista's hand. The older woman's fingers were thin and cold, the nails perfectly shaped, the wedding ring still bright on her hand after all those years. Callista tried not to stare at it. She wondered how many times that ring had flashed under soft party lights, while Sterling smiled for guests, while Lenora held a glass, while no one asked why her sleeve covered her wrist in July. "You should not have helped me," Lenora said. Callista's eyes sharpened. "Do not start that with me. I mean it. You were married only hours. You had a whole life ahead of you. I still do. Not with Thatcher." Callista looked at the pale morning beyond the blinds. "That is the first blessing of the day." Lenora closed her eyes, and a tear slipped sideways into her hair. "Sterling will punish you for this. Sterling can take a number. My father is already in a mood, and Dante Moretti currently has my wedding ring in his pocket. The men in this story are going to have to organize themselves if they all want to be dramatic at once." That did it. Lenora laughed. Only once, softly, and it hurt her ribs, but it was real. Callista smiled, because the sound felt like a small window opening in a locked house. Outside the room, low voices moved through the hallway. Dante had not left. Callista knew that without checking. His presence sat in the building like a storm waiting politely. Every now and then, one of his men passed the narrow window in the door. They never looked inside, never intruded, but they were always there. Practical reasons, Dante would probably say, security, strategy, liability, anything except care. Callista already understood that about him. He hid decent things behind colder words, so no one would mistake them for weakness. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Eric. Callista answered before the second ring. "Please tell me you are awake and caffeinated." Eric Hawthorne sounded like he had been born annoyed by incompetence and had spent every year since gathering proof. "I am awake because Uncle Garrison called me at 4 in the morning and said, and I quote, 'Callista married into a criminal beehive.' So yes, I am awake. I am also in their accounts. Callista sat straighter. Already? Your father has access to 3 joint venture portals with Kensington Development, because apparently nobody in your family thought to ask me before signing contracts with decorative vampires. They wore excellent tuxedos. That is how vampires get you. Despite everything, Callista felt some tight band around her chest loosen. Eric was strange, brilliant, allergic to small talk, and loyal in the terrifying way Hawthorns tended to be loyal. He could follow money like a bloodhound followed scent. What did you find? Enough to ruin brunch, Eric said. Fake invoices tied to construction material orders. Duplicate billing through 2 shell vendors. One of them routes through a Delaware holding company. The other routes through a consulting firm registered to a woman who appears to have died 9 years ago, which is generally frowned upon in accounting. Callista looked at Lenora, who was watching her with frightened hope. Sterling, Thatcher, and someone named Benedict Vale, though that might be an alias. Also, Thatcher's personal accounts are a disaster. He has loans against loans, private gambling debt, and a series of payments to lenders that do not have websites, licenses, or a healthy respect for tax law. Callista leaned back slowly. So the lifestyle is fake. Not all of it. The arrogance appears genuine. A knock came at the door. Dante opened it only after Callista nodded. He stepped inside with his sleeves rolled at the wrist and his phone in one hand. He looked as if he had not slept and had no intention of apologizing to his body about it. His gaze moved first to Lenora, then to Callista, then to the phone at her ear. "Is that your analyst?" he asked. Eric went quiet. Callista covered the speaker. "That depends. Is that your mafia voice?" "It is my morning voice." Hard to tell the difference. Dante's mouth moved slightly. "Put him on speaker." Callista did, because curiosity was stronger than pride. "Eric, you are now speaking to Dante Moretti. Be normal." Eric was silent for exactly 2 seconds. "I reject the assignment." Dante looked amused. "Mr. Hawthorne." "Mr. Moretti, I would say nice to meet you, but my cousin appears to have entered your vehicle covered in blood, so I assume the circumstances are legally textured." Callista closed her eyes. "Eric." Dante's smile was small. "I need the vendor names." Eric did not hesitate. Halewick Stone, Northline Materials, and Caris Urban Consulting. Dante's expression changed. Not much, just enough for the air to tighten. Callista noticed. "You know them." "Northline touched 2 of my protected projects last year," Dante said. "A shipment vanished. Sterling blamed union theft." "Was it union theft?" Eric asked. Dante's eyes cooled. "No." Eric made a thoughtful sound. "Then your problem and our problem are now holding hands." Callista looked from the phone to Dante. "Sterling stole from my father and from you. He skimmed from Moretti-backed contracts," Dante said, then pointed suspicion toward men under my protection. "That seems unwise." "It is suicidal when done poorly, and when done well." Dante looked at her. Still suicidal, just slower. Lenora turned her face toward the wall. Her hand had begun to tremble. Callista saw it and immediately lowered her voice. "Lenora, did you know about any of this?" Lenora shook her head, then stopped, as if honesty required more courage than silence. "I knew there was trouble. Sterling stopped letting me open mail years ago. He said I worried too much. Thatcher came to him 3 months ago asking for money. They argued in the study. Thatcher said the Hawthorne marriage would fix everything. Sterling said he had better make sure you were obedient first." The word sat in the room like something rotten. Dante went very still. Callista did not. She smiled, and it was the least warm thing about her. "I hope they enjoyed that theory while it lasted." Eric cleared his throat through the phone. "I am sending a secure folder to you and Uncle Garrison. I need whatever Mr. Moretti has on Northline and related project payments." Dante looked at one of his men through the glass. "Marco will send it." "Excellent," I love cooperation among people who frighten banks. Callista almost laughed, but Lenora's hand tightened around hers. There is more, Lenora whispered. Callista leaned closer. Tell me. Lenora swallowed carefully. Sterling keeps paper records, not at the penthouse. He does not trust clouds, because he says clouds are where fools keep evidence. There is a locked cabinet in the library of the Kensington townhouse. Green leather ledger books. He writes names in them. Payments, favors, who owes what, who was invited, who was not. I once saw Thatcher's name beside yours, months before you were engaged. Callista's blood cooled. Months. Lenora nodded. Before he met you at the museum gala. That memory rose in Callista's mind with sudden bitterness. Thatcher spilling champagne near her dress, apologizing with just enough charm, praising her laugh, asking about her father's work, as if he were fascinated by boring industrial contracts. She had thought it was chance. She had thought she was being seen. She had been selected. For a moment, the hurt was quiet, not loud enough for rage yet, just a clean little crack through the center of something she had wanted to believe. Dante saw that too. He missed nothing, which was becoming both useful and irritating. Callista, he said. She lifted her chin before her eyes could betray her. I am fine. No, you are angry. That is a form of fine in my family. Eric spoke gently now, which was rare enough to be alarming. Callista, I can follow the digital trail, but if those ledgers exist, they matter, especially if Sterling has kept records of bribes or private lenders. Dante nodded once. We need them. Callista looked at Lenora. Can you tell us how to find the cabinet? Lenora's face tightened. He changed the lock last year. Keys? Sterling wears one. Thatcher may have another. Dante slipped Callista's wedding ring from his pocket and held it between two fingers, the diamond catching the clinic light. Then we visit the groom. Callista stared at the ring. Please tell me your plan is not to trade jewelry for keys like some cursed fairy tale. My plan is to remind your husband that broken fingers can become a family discount. No. Dante's gaze shifted to her. Callista stood, his coat falling around her like a dark curtain. No, Thatcher is mine. Your hand shook when your phone rang. That was adrenaline. That was fear. Fine, it was fear. I am allowed to be afraid and still lead. The room went very quiet. Dante looked at her for a long second. Then he did something she had not expected. He stepped back, not away in dismissal, back in respect. Then lead, he said. Something in Callista's chest softened so suddenly it annoyed her. She turned to Eric on the phone. Send everything to Dad. Tell him not to call Sterling yet. Tell him to gather legal, but quietly. We go to the penthouse first. I want my clothes, my laptop, and every scrap of dignity they expected me to leave behind. That last item may not be at the penthouse, Eric said. You appear to have carried it out yourself. Callista's throat tightened. Thank you. Do not get emotional. It disturbs me. I love you too. She ended the call and looked at Dante. Can your men get me something that is not a robe? Dante's gaze moved over the borrowed coat, the slippers, the wild hair, the swollen cheek. Not with pity, not with hunger, with calculation and something quieter underneath. What do you need? Callista smiled. Something black, something comfortable. Something that says recently betrayed, but still better dressed than everyone in the room. For the first time that morning, Dante looked genuinely entertained. I know a woman. Of course you do. She is 73 and dresses half the widows in Queens. Callista paused. That was not the answer I expected. Most people expect the wrong things. An hour later, Callista stood in a small clinic washroom, wearing a black wrap dress with long sleeves, a pair of low boots, and gold hoops large enough to qualify as emotional support. The dress fit beautifully, which made her suspicious of Dante's mysterious 73-year-old fashion source. But she decided not to question miracles before noon. She washed her face, fixed her hair with pins a nurse had found, and applied lipstick from an unopened tube someone had placed in a paper bag with the clothes. Deep red, her color. The mark on her cheek remained visible. She considered covering it, then she did not. When she stepped into the hallway, Dante was waiting near the exit. His eyes moved once over her, only once. But the silence after it had weight. Callista lifted an eyebrow. No comment? I am deciding whether honesty is dangerous. Usually? He held out his coat. She looked at it, then at him. I have clothes now. It is cold. That sounded dangerously close to concern. Strategic fabric. She took the coat because it was cold, and because she liked the way he did not smirk when she accepted it. Lenora stayed at the clinic with guards outside her room, and a Hawthorne lawyer already on the way. Before leaving, Callista bent over her bed. I am going to get my things. Lenora gripped her hand. Do not go alone. Callista glanced toward the hallway, where Dante stood with 3 silent men. I appear to have collected a small weather system. Lenora's eyes moved to Dante. Fear flashed there first, then something like relief. Sterling is afraid of him. Good, Callista said. Let him enjoy a new experience. The ride back to the penthouse was quiet. Morning traffic had thickened, and Manhattan looked normal in the cruel way cities did after personal disasters. People crossed streets holding coffee. Dogs pulled on leashes. A woman in running clothes shouted into earbuds. No one knew that Callista's wedding night had cracked open a dynasty before dawn. No one knew she was sitting beside Dante Moretti with divorce forming in her mouth like a weapon. Dante broke the silence first. Do you want me inside the room? Callista looked at him. Yes. His gaze turned toward her. But not in front, she said. Beside. Or behind. Close enough to remind them the weather changed. Far enough that they know I am speaking for myself. Dante nodded. Done. You agree very easily for a feared man. I agree when the plan is good. And when it is bad, I improve it. That is arrogant. Often accurate. She looked out the window to hide her smile. At the tower, the doorman nearly swallowed his own tongue when he saw her step out of Dante Moretti's SUV. By the time they reached the private elevator, the building seemed to know. Staff looked away too quickly. A security guard fumbled with his access card. Dante said nothing. He did not have to. His men stood behind him like punctuation at the end of a threat. The penthouse doors opened to a room that still smelled of lilies and broken glass. Someone had cleaned the blood from the floor, but not well enough. Callista saw a faint smear near the edge of the white rug. Her stomach turned, then steadied. Some marks wanted to be witnessed. Thatcher stood near the windows with his hand in a temporary cast, his face pale and swollen with sleepless rage. Sterling sat in a chair beside the fireplace, fully dressed in a navy suit, as if violence had office hours. Aunt Coraline stood near the bar wearing pearls and an expression of tragic endurance. 2 lawyers hovered near the dining table. All of them began speaking at once. Then Dante stepped out of the elevator behind Callista. The room died. It was almost beautiful, really, the sudden quiet, the way Sterling's face lost color, the way Thatcher's mouth stayed open but forgot its sentence, the way Aunt Coraline's hand tightened around her pearls as if even inherited jewelry could pray. Callista looked around. Good morning. I see the vipers have gathered. Thatcher found his voice first. What the hell is he doing here? Callista smiled. You always wanted me to make powerful connections. Sterling stood slowly. Mr. Moretti. This is a private family matter. Dante's eyes moved to him. That sentence has worked poorly for your family tonight. Aunt Coraline stepped forward. Callista, dear, whatever you think happened, you are clearly overwhelmed. Weddings are emotional. Lenora has episodes. Sterling was trying to calm her, and you misunderstood. Callista looked at her for a long moment. Coraline, you are dressed like a funeral mint and lying before breakfast. Pick a struggle. One of Dante's men made the mistake of breathing too sharply. Dante did not look at him, but the man went still. Thatcher pointed at Callista with his good hand. She broke my fingers. You slapped me. You attacked me. After you slapped me, you humiliated me in front of my family. Your family watched your father beat your mother. Humiliation was already seated. Sterling's voice cut through the room. Enough. Callista turned to him. No, that word is not yours anymore. Sterling stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Not the bride, not the business connection, not the fat woman he had probably assumed could be controlled through shame and gratitude. Her, Callista Hawthorne, daughter of Garrison, granddaughter of women who did not faint politely, wife of nobody worth keeping. One lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Kensington, perhaps we should discuss this without outside parties. Callista held up one finger. First, never call me that again unless you want the room to become educational. Second, Mr. Moretti is not an outside party. Sterling's jaw tightened. He has nothing to do with this family. Dante finally moved. Only a few steps, slow and calm, until he stood near Callista's right shoulder, not blocking her, not taking over. Just there. I have Northline Materials, Dante said. Halewick Stone, Caris Urban Consulting. 3 city contracts, 4 missing shipments, 7 altered invoices, and 1 insulting attempt to make my people look careless. Sterling's face hardened. I don't know what you think you have. That is the difference between us, Dante said. I do not think. Callista opened the folder Eric had sent to her phone and mirrored it to the penthouse screen with a calm that felt better than screaming. Spreadsheets appeared where wedding photos had been displayed the night before. Vendor names, payment routes, duplicate invoices, transfers, shell companies, Thatcher's private debt payments, dates beside dates, amounts beside amounts, the Kensington name, stripped of polish and laid bare in numbers. Aunt Coraline looked at the screen, as if math had personally betrayed her. Thatcher's voice cracked. This is illegal. You hacked us. No, Callista said. You invited my father into business and then used shared portals to rob him. That is not hacking. That is you leaving the pantry open and being shocked when someone counted the silver. Sterling looked at the lawyers. They were no longer eager to speak. Callista stepped closer to Thatcher. He flinched before he could stop himself. She saw it, and so did everyone else. Here is what happens now, she said. You will sign divorce papers cleanly. You will make no claim to Hawthorne assets. You will return every dollar your family stole from my father's company. You will stay away from Lenora. You will not call her, visit her, send messages through relatives, or breathe in her direction with intention. Thatcher tried to laugh. It came out thin. You think you can give orders because you brought a thug into my home. Dante's men shifted. Dante did not. His eyes stayed on Callista, waiting. That restraint did something to the room. Even Sterling understood it. Dante Moretti was allowing Callista to hold the knife. She smiled at Thatcher. No, darling. I think I can give orders because you married a woman for access to her father's money, hit her before sunrise, and left a paper trail ugly enough to make federal prosecutors cancel lunch. Thatcher's face twisted. I will press charges for my hand. Callista looked at his cast. Please do. I would love to explain the sequence of events in court, with photographs of my face, and Lenora's medical report, and perhaps testimony from every person in this room who watched Sterling hit her and forgot how legs work. Aunt Coraline whispered, This is vulgar. Callista turned her head. No, Coraline. Vulgar is serving champagne in a room where a woman is bleeding. Sterling took one step forward. Dante's voice stopped him. Careful. One word. Quiet. Almost bored. Sterling stopped. Callista looked back at Thatcher. The papers will be ready today. I am not signing anything. Dante finally smiled. It was not kind. Then you will spend the afternoon learning how many lenders want to speak with a man whose father can no longer cover his debts. Thatcher went grey. Callista blinked. You found them already. Dante glanced at her. Men in debt are loud if you know where to listen. That is both impressive and rude. Thank you. It was not entirely a compliment. I accepted the useful part. Thatcher looked between them, anger mixing with something more humiliating, fear. You think this is funny? Callista stepped close enough that he could see the mark his hand had left on her cheek. No, I think it is hilarious. For 1 second, the polished room held its breath. Then Dante laughed softly from the corner, and the sound made Thatcher look smaller than the cast on his hand. The divorce papers arrived before noon because Garrison Hawthorne was a man who believed love meant speed, lawyers, and occasionally shouting at printers. He arrived with 2 attorneys, 1 security specialist, and a face so calm Callista knew he had already imagined several crimes and chosen paperwork instead. When he saw her cheek, his eyes changed. Thatcher took 1 step back. Garrison walked to his daughter and touched her face with 2 fingers, gentle as a prayer. Does it hurt? Less than his hand. His mouth tightened with pride he did not want to show in front of enemies. Good. Then he looked at Dante. For a moment, the 2 men measured each other in silence. 1 old business power, 1 underworld power, 2 different storms. Moretti, Garrison said. Hawthorne, thank you for my daughter. Callista immediately said, I am not a misplaced umbrella. Dante's gaze flicked to her. No one would mistake you for something that folds. Garrison looked between them once, and even in the middle of disaster, raised an eyebrow. Callista pointed at him. Do not start. The signing happened at the dining table beneath a chandelier that had probably watched generations of Kensingtons lie beautifully. Thatcher sat with his broken hand in its cast, gripping a pen awkwardly in his left. The first signature came out crooked. Callista leaned over. That says Thad. His jaw clenched. My hand is broken. Yes, I was there. Dante stood by the window, looking out at Manhattan. Try again, Thad. Garrison coughed once into his fist. One of the lawyers studied the ceiling with heroic focus. Thatcher signed again. Better this time. Not elegant, not powerful, not Kensington, just ink from a frightened man finally doing as he was told. When the last page was signed, Callista removed the wedding band from her finger and placed it on top of the papers. The diamond ring was already there, returned from Dante's pocket with no ceremony. She looked at Thatcher. You can keep them. They match the marriage. Expensive, cold, and badly chosen. Aunt Coraline made a wounded sound. There is no need to be cruel. Callista picked up her purse. That is true, which is why I am being precise. She walked to the bedroom and packed only what mattered, her laptop, her grandmother's earrings, the lipstick from the reception, her own clothes. She left the gown hanging over a chair. Let them keep it. Let it haunt their cream-colored room like a beautiful accusation. When she returned, Dante was waiting near the elevator, not impatient, not possessive, just waiting. Callista looked back once at the Kensingtons. Sterling's face had collapsed into something old and hateful. Thatcher would not meet her eyes. Coraline looked as if the room had become too common for her. Lenora is gone from you, Callista said. So am I. Sterling's mouth curled. You will regret making an enemy of this family. Callista stepped into the elevator beside Dante. Sterling, by tomorrow morning, your family will be lucky if your enemies still take your calls. The doors slid shut. Only then did Callista let her shoulders drop. For a moment, She closed her eyes. She had not cried, not in the penthouse, not at the table, not while signing away the shortest marriage in Hawthorne history. But now the elevator moved downward, smooth and quiet, and the day caught up to her all at once. Dante did not speak. That helped. After a few floors, she opened her eyes. "You were very quiet. You told me beside or behind." "I did. I listen." She looked at him. There was no smile on his face now, no dry amusement, only that unnerving stillness, the kind that made space for truth without touching it. Callista swallowed. "I thought he loved me." Dante's jaw shifted slightly. "I know that sounds stupid after everything. It does not." She laughed once without humor. "You are supposed to be terrifying, not kind." "I did not say kind. I said accurate." "Strategic kindness again?" "Something like that." The elevator opened into the garage. Dante's SUV waited exactly where it had been the night before, as if the whole terrible story had circled back to the wrong door that saved her. Callista looked at it, then at him. "I climbed into the wrong car." Dante opened the door for her. "No." She paused. His eyes held hers. "You climbed out of the wrong life." Callista stared at him for one long second. Then, because feeling too much made her nervous, she said, "That was dangerously poetic. You should have that checked." Dante's mouth curved. "Get in, trouble." She did. This time, she did not ask him to drive. This time, she knew exactly whose car it was. And when the SUV pulled away from the tower, leaving the Kensington penthouse high above them like a bright little coffin in the sky, Callista Hawthorne looked down at her bare left hand and felt something strange begin beneath the grief. Not peace yet. Not happiness. Not love, because that would have been absurd. But freedom had a pulse, and for the first time since she had put on the wedding dress, Callista could feel it beating. Freedom had a pulse, and for the first few blocks, Callista Hawthorne did not trust it. She sat in the back of Dante Moretti's SUV with her left hand resting open in her lap, staring at the pale line where her wedding band had been. It looked too small to be proof of anything. One faint circle on her finger, one swollen cheek, one black dress borrowed before breakfast, and somehow her whole life had split into before and after. Before, she had been Mrs. Kensington for a few violent hours. After, she was Callista again, carrying her laptop, her grandmother's earrings, and enough rage to heat the city through winter. Outside the window, Manhattan kept doing what Manhattan did best. It moved on loudly. Taxis honked. Steam rose from street grates. A man in a grey scarf argued with a coffee cart vendor like pastry selection was a moral emergency. Nobody looked at the black SUV. Nobody knew that inside it, a ruined bride was slowly becoming the most dangerous woman in the room. Dante sat across from her, quiet in the way only very controlled men could be quiet. He was not scrolling through his phone. He was not giving orders. He was watching the city, but Callista had the strong sense that he was also watching her reflection in the glass. She should have found that annoying. She did find it annoying. She also found it strangely steadying. There was no pity in him. That mattered. Pity would have made her scream. Dante seemed to understand that the worst thing he could offer her right now was softness without respect. After several minutes, he said, "You have not asked where we are going." Callista kept looking out the window. I assumed either the clinic, my father's office, or a warehouse where men named Marco discuss loyalty near folding chairs. His mouth moved. "The clinic first. Disappointingly normal. I can arrange folding chairs later." "Please don't. My day is already dramatic." He leaned back. "Your father is meeting us there. Your cousin is sending files. My people are collecting Northline's records before Sterling's men can destroy them." Callista finally looked at him. "And how are your people doing that?" "Carefully. That is not an answer. It is the answer that keeps you from becoming an accessory." I was married to Thatcher Kensington before sunrise. I think my standards for association have already suffered. Dante almost smiled. Noted. The clinic was calmer when they returned, though calm had become a suspicious thing. Callista no longer believed quiet rooms were safe just because no one was yelling in them. Lenora was sitting up against pillows, wrapped in a soft grey robe one of the nurses had found. Her face looked smaller in daylight, without silk and diamonds and the forced smile she had worn at the reception. But her eyes were clearer. That was something. Garrison stood near the window speaking quietly to a lawyer, his big shoulders stiff under his coat. When he saw Callista, he stopped mid-sentence and crossed the room so quickly Dante's men stepped aside without being told. Garrison pulled her into his arms. Callista held herself together for exactly 2 seconds. Then she leaned into him and closed her eyes. Her father smelled like coffee, wool, and the peppermint candies he kept in his desk drawer because he claimed they helped him think. He did not say she was brave. He did not say everything would be fine. He just held her, like he had when she was 7, and had fallen off a pony because she refused to admit she was afraid of jumping. Back then, he had waited until she stopped shaking, then asked if she wanted to get back on or go home. He had never made the choice for her. That was one of the reasons she had always known what love was supposed to feel like. "I'm all right," she said into his coat. "No, you're not," she breathed out. "No, but I'm standing. That is a start." Dante remained by the door, speaking low to Marco, pretending not to watch father and daughter. Callista noticed anyway. She was beginning to understand his kind of restraint. He could have stepped into every space, could have taken command the way powerful men love to do when a woman was shaken. Instead, he stayed near the edge of the room and let the people who loved her reach her first. Eric arrived 20 minutes later with 3 laptops, 2 coffees, and the expression of a man who had discovered both a crime and a formatting issue. He set everything on the small table by Lenora's bed and began opening files without saying hello. Callista looked at him. "Good morning to you too. I have been awake too long for greetings. You love this." "I love clean evidence. This is dirty evidence, but there is a lot of it, so I am emotionally conflicted." He looked at Dante. "Your Marco sent excellent files. Terrifying file names, but excellent." Marco, from the hall, looked proud, and then quickly looked blank again. Eric turned one laptop toward the room. Sterling did not just skim. He built a whole little theater of theft. Fake vendors, inflated material orders, cancelled shipments that were billed anyway, consulting fees routed through companies connected to Thatcher's private lenders. The Hawthorne contracts were supposed to cover his cash gaps. The Moretti-linked projects were supposed to cover his underworld debt. He was moving the same money in circles and hoping everyone would blame everyone else before noticing him. Lenora stared at the screen. "Sterling always said the numbers were too complicated for me." Eric's face softened, which for him meant his voice lost one sharp edge. "They were not too complicated. He just needed you to believe the door was locked." Callista looked at Lenora, and the older woman's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not apologize for them. Dante stepped closer to the table. "What about the ledgers?" Eric tapped another file. "We need them. Digital evidence is strong, but if Sterling kept written records of bribes and private lending arrangements, that becomes the spine. It connects motive, intent, and names." Garrison's lawyer nodded. "With the clinic report and the witnesses from the penthouse, we can also move for protection for Lenora." Lenora flinched. "Sterling will fight." Callista took her hand. "Let him. He has had decades of practice terrifying people in private. Now he can try it with paperwork and bad lighting." Lenora's mouth trembled again. "You make everything sound less impossible." "No," Callista said. "I make it sound properly stupid. Sometimes monsters shrink when you describe them accurately." Dante watched her when she said that. It was not the look men had given her at the wedding, the look that measured her body and decided what story to write over it. Dante's gaze had weight, but not judgment. He looked at her like she was a fire he respected enough not to touch without permission. By noon, the plan had formed around the room like weather. Garrison's lawyers would file emergency motions and freeze Hawthorne payments to Kensington Development. Eric would send the strongest financial trail to federal investigators he trusted through legal channels. Dante's people would cut off Sterling's access to the private lenders who had been keeping him afloat and collect proof from the Moretti-protected projects. Lenora would remain at the clinic until a safe apartment was ready. No one liked the last part except Dante, who simply said he had an empty apartment in Queens and 3 guards who could look bored outside a building, better than anyone in the city. Callista folded her arms. Why do you have an empty apartment in Queens? Many reasons. That answer has a trench coat. It is clean, quiet, and not connected to the Kensingtons. Lenora looked worried. I don't want to bring trouble to anyone. Dante's voice lowered. Mrs. Kensington, trouble has already spent years living in your house. Let it be inconvenienced for once. Lenora looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Callista looked away before Dante could see her smile. He saw it anyway. That evening, the ledgers came out of the Kensington Townhouse Library. Not because anyone broke a window or kicked down a door, though Dante looked like he knew men who considered both hobbies. They came out because Lenora remembered that Sterling kept a duplicate cabinet key inside the base of an ugly bronze horse statue he had inherited from an uncle he hated. The detail arrived suddenly while she was drinking tea. She sat upright and whispered, "The horse." Everyone turned. Then she began laughing so hard she had to hold her ribs. I forgot the horse. I always hated that horse. Garrison's lawyer arranged entry with the police present, under the claim of retrieving Lenora's personal documents. Sterling had already fled to his club. Thatcher was hiding at a doctor's office and telling people his bride had assaulted him during a mental episode. Aunt Coraline was giving careful phone calls to friends, painting the family as victims of vulgar Hawthorne aggression and dangerous outside influence. But paper did not care about manners. Neither did ledgers. They found 5 green leather books in the cabinet, exactly where Lenora said they would be, lined up like obedient little ghosts. By the time Eric opened the first one, even he went silent. Sterling had written everything down. Payments to inspectors, gifts to councilmen, transfers disguised as restoration donations, names of men who lent Thatcher money, notes beside Callista's name from before the engagement, Hawthorne daughter, high-value access, sensitive about appearance but publicly confident, approach through arts charity, father protective, cousin financial risk, secure marriage before audit season. Callista read that page twice. Sensitive about appearance. The words did not hurt the way Thatcher's slap had. They hurt in a different place, a quieter place. She thought of every compliment he had given her that now tasted poisoned. The way he had said he loved her confidence, the way he had praised her bold clothes, the way he had acted as if accepting her body made him noble. She stood in Eric's office with the ledger open beneath her hands and understood that Thatcher had not failed to see her. He had studied her. He had looked for doors in her heart and tried to find one marked insecurity. Dante was the one who reached across the table and gently closed the ledger. Callista looked up. He said nothing at first. That was wise. Then he said, he was wrong. She laughed, but it came out thin. About which part? There are so many exciting options. About your softness being a weakness. Her throat tightened. Dante's hand rested on the closed ledger, close to hers but not touching. Soft things survive differently. That is not the same as fragile. For once, Callista had no sharp answer ready. She looked down at their hands, separated by less than an inch and a world of caution. Then she pulled hers back, not because she wanted distance, but because she was afraid of wanting less of it. Over the next week, The Kensingtons began to fall. It did not happen all at once. That would have been too kind. It happened slowly, publicly, and with the kind of elegant humiliation their family had always feared more than poverty. First, Hawthorne Industries filed suit and froze all active payments. Then, investigators arrived at Kensington Development with warrants. Then 2 banks suspended accounts after Eric's evidence reached the right desks. Then Northline Materials stopped answering Sterling's calls because Dante's people had made it clear that every door Sterling used in the old quiet world was now closed. Men who had once smiled at him in private rooms began forgetting his number. Women who had once feared Aunt Coraline's invitations began declining them. The newspapers did not call it abuse at first. They called it financial misconduct, a collapse, a scandal involving construction fraud. Rich families were always granted polite language before the truth got its shoes on. But then Lenora signed her statement. She did it in the safe apartment in Queens, sitting at a small kitchen table with jasmine in a cracked blue pot near the window. The apartment had been empty when she arrived, but Callista refused to let it feel temporary. She brought blankets, dishes, curtains, books, and a kettle. Garrison sent furniture. Eric sent a home security system so elaborate even Dante raised an eyebrow. Dante sent guards and claimed they were necessary because Sterling might try something reckless. Callista accused him of being secretly kind. He told her he did not tolerate slander in safe houses. Lenora's statement took 4 hours. She spoke of Sterling's temper, the first slap, the first apology, the first time he told her no one would believe her because everyone loved a charming man with a wounded wife. She spoke of Aunt Coraline helping hide bruises with scarves and foundation. She spoke of Thatcher learning early that women stayed quiet if men made the consequences expensive enough. She cried twice. She stopped once. Callista sat beside her the whole time, not touching unless Lenora reached first. When it was done, Lenora looked smaller and lighter at the same time. "I thought saying it would kill me," she whispered. Callista squeezed her hand. "And?" Lenora looked toward the window, where the jasmine leaves caught the afternoon sun. It did not. The story changed after that. The papers stopped calling it a business scandal. Former staff came forward, a driver, a housekeeper, a retired assistant who had kept photographs in case Lenora ever asked for help. A Kensington cousin admitted everyone knew Sterling could be cruel, though he used the word difficult because cowards loved soft furniture for hard truths. The city began doing what it always did when a polished family cracked. It pretended it had seen the cracks all along. Sterling was arrested on a wet Thursday morning outside his club. The photo was everywhere by lunch. Silver hair flattened by rain, expensive coat. One officer guiding his head down into the car. His face carried the shocked anger of a man who had believed consequences were for other people. Thatcher vanished for 2 days, then resurfaced at a hotel under his mother's maiden name, which might have been clever if Eric had not already flagged every card connected to him. He was charged later, less grandly than Sterling, but just as satisfyingly. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted extortion, domestic assault after Callista filed her own statement and released the clinic photo of her cheek through her lawyer, with the simple line that she had nothing to hide. Aunt Coraline was not arrested. Callista almost thought that was worse for her. Coraline lost something she valued more than freedom. She lost invitation. Clubs quietly removed her from committees. Charities discovered moral standards overnight. Women who had once feared her opinions now looked through her in restaurants. Her power had always depended on rooms agreeing to pretend she mattered. Once the pretending stopped, there was very little woman left. Through all of it, Dante kept appearing. Not every day. Never on a schedule. That would have been too honest. But he was there when Lenora moved in. He was there when Eric needed Moretti project records explained. He was there when Garrison wanted to know whether Sterling had other underworld debts that might become legal problems later. He was there one night when Callista arrived at the apartment with groceries and found him in the hallway holding a paper bag from a bakery, looking deeply annoyed to be associated with pastries. She stopped in front of him. "Are those muffins?" "They are documents." "The documents smell like cinnamon. Then the bakery has poor security." Lenora opened the apartment door behind them and smiled for the first time without flinching. Dante brought breakfast. "It is 6 in the evening," he said. Callista took the bag from him. "Then clearly you are not a criminal mastermind. You are a confused brunch aunt." His eyes narrowed. "I have ended men for less." "No, you haven't." He leaned closer, voice low. "You are very certain for a woman in a hallway with no witnesses." She looked up at him. "There are 2 guards by the elevator, a retired teacher across the hall with the door cracked open, and Lenora holding what appears to be a ceramic goose. I like my odds." Dante looked toward the apartment. Lenora did, in fact, have a ceramic goose in one hand. She blushed. It was near the door. For one long second, the 3 of them stared at one another. Then Callista laughed. Lenora laughed too. Even Dante lowered his head, and though no sound came out, his shoulders moved once. That was how the romance grew, not through grand speeches, though Dante was occasionally guilty of saying something darkly poetic and then pretending he had not. Not through rescue, because Callista refused to be anyone's rescued woman. It grew through arguments over practical things. Over whether guards outside Lenora's building were discreet if they all wore the same black coat. Over whether Dante's driver should stop opening Callista's door when she was perfectly capable of opening it herself. Over whether sending a private chef to a woman who had asked for a simple casserole was thoughtful or alarming. Over whether Dante's idea of casual dinner should involve a restaurant with a private entrance and menus without prices. He learned her favorite coffee order, then denied knowing it. She learned he hated olives, then ordered extra just to watch his face. He called her trouble. She called him expensive weather. He sent Lenora a new lock for the apartment and labeled it a structural upgrade. Callista sent him a thank you card that said, "Congratulations on experiencing emotions." He kept it in his desk and threatened Marco when Marco noticed. Dante never once treated her body like something to excuse. That was new enough to scare her. He did not compliment her like he was forgiving her size. He did not say she was beautiful despite anything. He looked at her when she entered a room as if the room had improved its argument. He liked the bold dresses, the red lipstick, the gold jewelry, the way she occupied space like she had paid rent to the universe and expected a receipt. Once, during a meeting with Garrison and Eric, a contractor made the mistake of speaking over her twice. The 3rd time, Dante did not threaten him. He simply turned to Callista and said, "Finish what you were saying." The room followed his attention back to her. She finished. The contractor never interrupted again. Later, in the hallway, she said, "I could have handled him." "I know." "Then why did you do that?" "I did not handle him. I returned the room." She stared at him for so long he almost looked uncomfortable. Then she said, "That was also dangerously poetic." "I will make an appointment." "Good. It is becoming chronic." But not everything was charming. Healing never moved in a straight line, and freedom had sharp corners. Lenora had nightmares. Callista had sudden waves of humiliation that arrived when she least expected them, usually in quiet moments, usually when she remembered the wedding guests calling her lucky. Sometimes she woke angry enough to pace her apartment at 3 in the morning. Sometimes she wondered how she had missed so much. Sometimes she wondered whether some small part of her had accepted Thatcher's polished affection because she was tired of being treated like confidence made her difficult. One night, Dante found her outside Lenora's building, sitting on the front steps in a wool coat while rain misted over Queens. His SUV waited at the curb. He did not ask what was wrong. He sat beside her, which made the narrow step look almost ridiculous under the weight of him. Callista stared at the wet sidewalk. "I hate that he picked me." Dante's gaze remained forward. Thatcher? Sterling, Thatcher, the whole rotten nest. I hate that they studied me and decided I would be useful. I hate that I smiled at him. I hate that I thought it was love when it was a business plan with teeth. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Predators do not choose weakness. They choose value they think they can control." Callista turned toward him. His face was serious, shadowed under the streetlight. "They chose you because you were valuable. They failed because you were not controllable." Her eyes burned, and she hated that too. "Do you practice these things in mirrors?" "No. You just walk around saying emotionally devastating things at women in the rain. Only one woman." The rain made the silence softer. Callista looked at him then, really looked. The feared man, the dangerous man, the man people whispered about and owed money to and crossed streets to avoid. He was sitting on a wet step in Queens because she was sad, and he had chosen not to make her sadness smaller than it was. He was patient with her anger, careful with her fear, amused by her sharpness, never once surprised by her courage. That was the first night she let herself touch his hand. Only his hand, only for a moment. Her fingers rested over his knuckles. His hand turned beneath hers, slow enough that she could move away. She did not. Neither of them spoke. For once, the city handled the noise. 6 months later, Lenora had Jasmine on the balcony, 3 locks on the door, and a breakfast sandwich habit that had become almost holy. She made them every Saturday morning in the tiny Queen's kitchen, standing in soft house slippers with her hair loose around her shoulders, humming to herself while eggs sizzled and bread toasted. The first time Callista heard her hum, she had to step into the hallway and pretend to check a message because the sound undid her. It was not a grand victory. No judge had announced it, no newspaper had printed it, but a woman who once walked on silent feet through a penthouse full of fear was now humming off-key over a frying pan in an apartment where every cup belonged to her. That felt bigger than headlines. Sterling was awaiting trial. Thatcher had accepted a deal that kept him out of society and very much inside consequences. Aunt Coraline had moved to Connecticut, where she reportedly used the phrase "family tragedy at lunch" and found fewer listeners every week. Hawthorne Industries recovered most of the stolen money, and Garrison donated part of the restitution to a fund for women leaving abusive households. Eric named the spreadsheet for the case Kensington Trash Fire Final, then had to rename it when lawyers objected. Dante's organization recovered what it was owed and made sure the men who had helped Sterling hide behind false contracts understood that the old arrangement was dead. He never told Callista the details. She never asked for all of them. They had learned where respect required a door, and where trust meant not opening every locked room just because you had the key. On that Saturday morning, Dante drove Callista to Lenora's apartment himself. He claimed Marco was busy. Callista knew Marco was not busy because she had seen him drinking coffee outside Dante's building 10 minutes earlier, but she decided to allow the lie because Dante was particularly handsome when he was pretending not to want ordinary things. He stopped at the curb and came around to open her door. Callista looked up at him from the seat. "Still not a chauffeur? I am not a chauffeur. And yet here you are, opening doors. I open doors for difficult women who accuse me of emotional growth." That sounds like a very specific business model. Low volume, high risk. She stepped out, smoothing the emerald green dress she had chosen because Lenora loved bright colors now, and because Dante always went quiet for half a second when she wore green. He did it again. She caught him. "Subtle," she said. "I said nothing. Your face filed a report. My face is private. Not when it looks at me like that." Dante leaned slightly closer. "How does it look at you?" Callista's answer caught in her throat, which was deeply inconvenient, because she enjoyed having the last word. His eyes were warm today, still dark, still dangerous, but warm in a way that belonged only to her. That was another thing she had learned. Dante could be feared by half the city and still look at one woman as if setting down every weapon at her feet. Before she could answer, Lenora opened the balcony door above them and called down, "If you two are done arguing romantically on the sidewalk, breakfast is getting cold." Callista looked up. "We are not arguing romantically." Dante said, "We are." She turned on him. "Traitor." He offered his arm. "Trouble." She took it. Upstairs, Lenora's apartment smelled like toast, coffee, butter, and jasmine. Sunlight spilled across the small table. The blue pot on the balcony had grown fuller, green vines curling around the railing, like they had finally found something safe to hold. Lenora looked different now, not younger exactly. Freer. Her face still carried lines from the life she had survived, but they no longer looked like cracks. They looked like proof. She hugged Callista first, then surprised Dante by hugging him too. He stood perfectly still for 1 second, as if no one had trained him for peaceful attacks from grateful women. Then he carefully patted her back. Callista watched with delight. "Are you malfunctioning?" Dante gave her a warning look over Lenora's shoulder. "No." Lenora stepped back, smiling. "He brought oranges." Callista looked at the bag on the counter. Of course he did. "They are for vitamins," Dante said. "Strategic citrus?" "Yes." Breakfast was loud in the small, lovely way family meals became loud. Lenora asked about Callista's new consulting work with Hawthorne Industries, where she had begun reviewing partnership culture before contracts were signed, because apparently she had developed a talent for smelling expensive rot under polished manners. Eric called halfway through to complain that nobody appreciated his new fraud model. Garrison sent a photo of himself holding a fishing rod and looking too pleased with retirement for a man who still visited the office 4 days a week. Dante answered 3 messages, frowned at one of them, and put the phone away when Callista stole a piece of bacon from his plate. "You have your own," he said. "Yours looked emotionally neglected." It was not. "It is now safe." Lenora laughed into her coffee. After breakfast, Callista stepped onto the balcony. The city looked different from here than it had from the Kensington penthouse. Lower, louder, more alive. There was laundry on a line across the alley, children yelling near the corner, music from an open window, someone frying onions downstairs. Nothing here pretended to be spotless. Callista loved it for that. Dante came out behind her, bringing her coat, though she had not asked. She glanced at it. "You know, one day I may experience weather without your supervision." Unlikely. Bossy. Accurate. She slipped into the coat anyway. His hands did not linger when he helped her. They never did unless she asked. That carefulness still reached parts of her she had not known were waiting. For a while, they stood beside the jasmine in comfortable silence. Then Dante said, "There is a dinner next week." Callista looked at him. That sounded like a trap wearing shoes. "It is a charity dinner, public. Many people who have been curious about you will attend. Curious about me, or curious whether the fat runaway bride is now dating the mafia boss who helped ruin her in-laws." His jaw tightened at the word fat, not because he disliked it, but because he disliked the way other people used it against her. Callista had learned the difference. "Both," he said. She appreciated that he did not lie. "And you want me there?" "I do." "As what?" The question hung between them, not because she did not know, because she needed him to say it carefully. Dante turned toward her. "As yourself, not as proof. Not as a warning, not as a woman under my protection. Beside me, if you choose it." There it was again, the door, open but not pushed. Callista looked down at the street. 6 months ago, she had walked into a wedding believing she was entering a polished life. Instead, she had found blood on marble, cruelty in silk, and a wrong black SUV waiting in a garage like fate had a dark sense of humor. She had lost a husband she never truly had. She had gained enemies, scars, and a story people would whisper about for years. But she had also found Lenora. She had found a new use for her own rage. She had found a man who could frighten a room silent and still wait for her answer like it mattered more than his pride. She turned back to Dante. You understand, people will talk. People already talk. They will say I moved from one dangerous man to another. His face stayed calm, but something in his eyes darkened. And have you? Callista studied him. She thought about Thatcher's hand on her wrist. Sterling saying family business. Aunt Coraline calling violence emotional. Then she thought about Dante stepping back at the clinic when she said she would lead. Dante closing a ledger before it cut her deeper. Dante sitting in the rain, letting silence do the work. Dante opening doors but never locking them. No, she said. I moved from being handled to being heard. Dante's expression changed so softly that anyone else might have missed it. Callista reached for his hand, more certain this time. But if you ever start thinking protection means making my choices for me, I will become extremely educational. His thumb brushed once over her knuckles. I would expect nothing less. Good. And if anyone at that dinner insults you, I will handle it. I know. She narrowed her eyes. That sounded sincere. It was. How unsettling. Dante leaned closer. Callista. She forgot, briefly, what she had planned to say next. He touched her face with the back of his fingers, not the cheek Thatcher had struck, but the other one, gentle and slow. May I kiss you? The question moved through her like sunlight after a long winter, not because no one had kissed her before, because he asked as if wanting did not erase her right to answer. Callista smiled. You may. No. Dante kissed her on Lenora's small balcony beside the jasmine, with breakfast cooling inside and queens waking around them. It was not rushed. It was not claimed. It was warm, careful, and deep enough that Callista forgot every clever thing she had ever known how to say. When he pulled back, his forehead rested near hers for one quiet second. Then Lenora called from inside, I am happy for you, but if you make me pretend not to see this, I will burn the second batch of sandwiches. Callista burst out laughing against Dante's mouth. Dante closed his eyes as if praying for patience. Your family is loud. Callista touched his lapel. You should have thought of that before letting me into your car. You let yourself into my car. Details. He looked at her then, really looked, and smiled in the way only she got to see. Best mistake of my life. Callista's chest went soft and bright all at once. She could have made a joke. She almost did. But some moments deserved to be allowed to stand without armor. So she said, mine too. Later, when they left the apartment, Dante opened the car door for her again, and she let him, mostly because he looked so satisfied by the ritual, and partly because she liked catching the little ways dangerous men became tender when they thought no one was taking notes. As the SUV pulled away, Lenora waved from the balcony, surrounded by jasmine and morning light. Callista waved back, until the building turned the corner and disappeared. Dante drove this time, which still looked strange enough to amuse her. The most feared mafia boss in New York, hands steady on the wheel, pretending he had not spent his morning carrying oranges and being teased by women he could not intimidate. Callista leaned back in the passenger seat. You know, you really are a dramatic man. I am driving quietly. Exactly, dramatically quiet. You are trouble. She smiled at the city through the windshield. Yes. Dante glanced at her. Proud of it? Callista looked down at her bare left hand, then out at the road ahead. She thought of the wedding gown left behind in the penthouse, the broken fingers, the green ledgers, Sterling in handcuffs, Thatcher signing with his left hand while Dante called him Thad, Lenora humming in her kitchen, her father saying she had done right. Eric renaming evidence files badly. Dante asking before he kissed her. The whole impossible path from chaos to this quiet car. "I am," she said, because the wedding night that ruined her life had not ruined her at all. It had burned down the wrong future before she could live inside it. It had shown her the truth, beneath diamonds and champagne. It had carried her, barefoot and furious, into the wrong black SUV and placed her face to face with a man the city feared, only for her to discover that fear was not the same as power, and power was not worth having unless it knew how to protect without owning. Callista Hawthorne had entered the Kensington family as an underestimated bride they thought they could use. She left it as the woman who exposed them, freed Lenora, defended her father, and made the most dangerous man in New York laugh when he least expected it. She had learned that love could begin in chaos, but it could not survive without choice. She had learned that loyalty was louder than reputation. She had learned that taking up space was not a flaw, not a challenge, not an apology waiting to happen. It was a warning. And beside her, Dante Moretti drove through the bright Manhattan morning with one hand on the wheel and the other resting open between them, waiting until she chose to take it. So she did.